Here is a Zenith minisPort. A bit of a rare laptop. I believe late 80s this came out. I managed to get my hands on one. And this is not a review of this laptop so much. There's a couple of them online right now. Really good. Actually, it goes through a lot of the cool features of the laptop. I just want to quickly talk about how I got mine going, because it is more often than not that you come across, if you do come across these, they don't work anymore. And if you do a little bit of research on it, it seems like the most common issue is the power supply. And, you know, when I first heard that, my first thought was, well, that sounds actually pretty easy. This is what I thought the power supply was. This comes with the unit. It is the AC to DC adapter. It plugs into this, the battery pack. The battery pack slides into this little side slot there. And, you know, what I thought provides the power to the unit. And it does, kind of. But what I've learned is that their power supply is actually inside the unit. I'll post up a couple pictures here quickly. And in my case, once I got it open, the power supply, it was in pretty rough shape. A lot of leaking caps. That seems to be very common. The board itself was just, it had corrosion on it. The solder joints were like fuzzy. So, long story short, I ended up recapping it completely, cleaning up the board. But I was still having issues. Now, I want to talk to you about a little bit about what I've done to kind of get mine up and running here. And actually, let's power this on. So the unit, as I said, has this AC to DC adapter, has a battery pack. The AC to DC adapter provides 9 volts, which I believe are used to charge the battery. I'm not really sure what else the 9 volts is for, because the battery generates 6 volts. And there's 3 terminals here, obviously ground. One is 9 volts that comes straight through from the AC adapter. The other is the 6 volts provided by the battery. After keeping it plugged in some time, my battery did start to come up to charge. And I was getting some things on the screen. But it wasn't consistent. Then the battery would fail, and then the unit would just shut off completely. It didn't matter if I had 9 volts or not, though. And this is where I got a little confused with reading online and looking at the schematics and whatnot. I don't know what the 9 volts do other than tell the unit that it's been plugged in. I believe it runs exclusively off of 6 volts from the battery, which does kind of make sense, right? Because it's a laptop. You know, you want to be able to be mobile with it, so you're not always going to have the 9 volts, or sorry, the AC adapter plugged in. So, I guess what I'm getting at is you must have a working battery, or this does not work. And these things are old. So probably very common. These things don't hold a charge. Mine was for a bit, but it really isn't. And I believe you can actually repair this. These are sub-C cells. I've not opened it myself, but I've read online that there's sub-C cells in there. 5 of them to produce the 6 volts. So I believe if your charging circuitry is still in order, then, you know, you can probably get it to work. I took a different route. I went out and got myself, just off the local ads here, a 6 volt power supply. And I've wired it in using a barrel jack. This is if you had one of these units with a modem. I didn't have a modem on mine. That's where the modem would go. So I just attached a barrel jack and wired it directly in to the 6-volt input on my power supply. And, you know, knock on wood, it's been pretty good, pretty consistent. Seems to work. I wired in here. I originally was going to put it here, but I thought, you know, if I ever do want to hook up the battery again, I didn't want something in there interfering with it. So I've left this chamber completely empty. But as you can see, it seems to be working great. And again, when I go back to the 9 volts, I don't even know what the 9 volts do. The computer obviously has some type of a sensor in there, because when the 9 volts is on, I get like an amber light down here in power, but nothing else changes. This thing must have 6 volts. So this is all so the point of the video, I just wanted to show you guys how I bypass this battery adapter with just a 6-volt power supply. And it works great, and I have this really cool minisPort running. So if you find yourself with one of these and it's not powering on, you know, replacing the power adapter, it's not super advanced, but it's not for the faint of heart either. It's kind of buried in there, a lot of screws, which of course not many of them are of different type, but it's totally doable. And again, you know, at some point maybe I will get around to replacing this battery pack, like fixing that as well. But yeah, so there is the minisPort revived using a modern AC adapter. One thing I want to add too, in terms of it's running on 6 volts, on the bottom you will see the coin cell battery slot, which on a, you know, your typical computer, you'd have a coin cell battery to keep the real-time clock going and whatnot, and that's what this does. However, there's 2 of them, and not a totally uncommon model, the CR2430. You can get them. I got these at the dollar store, but it uses 2 of them, and since they're 3 volts each, you know, there's your 6 volts right there. It is used to keep the real-time clock going, but also the internal RAM disk and CMOS settings. But it only lasts a few days. So this laptop requires, it pretty much needs 6 volts constantly, or all the settings get wiped out and your RAM disk is gone. So I just want to mention that as well. I've replaced these twice now. I mean, if it's not plugged in and powered on, it's going to lose its settings. These don't last very long at all. Kind of an interesting setup, but I guess back in the day, the batteries probably lasted much longer, and the expectation was that you would plug it in probably daily to keep that battery charged. So just a heads up if you find yourself in that situation.